it's gonna look like this under the cover. Like right there. Hold me to it. You know what I'm saying? I think right there. Like maybe right there. No, probably like a little, if that's the spare tire kind of thing. You're gonna put this cover on, you're gonna have this SUV looking thing under here. You know? It's gonna be pretty slick. Hey guys, happy Monday. This is another 6100 truck update. We keep a cover on this thing. The dream here is to have nice like black MCD1 covers on every vehicle. And when we work on each car, then we just take that cover off, and then at night we cover them back up. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's for secrecy, but just to keep things clean. And like, you know, we're working in a small studio space, so with that, like even if we just blow job the ground and we clean up, or we, you know, everybody, especially during the day, if you're making a mess and you're into a project, sometimes you have to clean up 3 or 4 times a day. And anytime you blow stuff on the ground, it goes on places, and a lot of this is raw metal. A lot of it has some kind of a coating like WD-40 on it. And it just gets to a point where you're making extra work by having everything uncovered. So it's a nice kind of care presentation for the clients too, to know that their car is covered and it's only uncovered when it's worked on. So like I said, I'm gonna plant this seed now, but all nice black covers, MCD1 badging or branding somewhere on them on every single vehicle. Let's look at this thing. Last update, we were just on tin work. We're going to still be on tin work, but there is more done, and there's more to talk about, and there's definitely more to look at. Shot list: front upper aero, detailed complete, front bumper additions, light package on the front bumper, lower electronics console, dash pod cowls, upper accessory console, front clip with new pins, and we want to cover our slapper arms. We always get a question, well, let's not say our slapper arms, but the Everson suspension slapper arms, because this is an Everson chassis. So don't want to get that twisted, but we can at least go over the details on that, you know, last or something, just because there's always questions on like, why is that there? How does it work? What does it do? Etc. Right off the bat, we've done a lot of work on this, and it's very easy to start moving through work and not have everything completely buttoned up. And I am at a point where it feels a little overwhelming. And I don't mean it's an impossible task, but just there's so much little stuff where if I can look, and I look in every little spot and I go, oh my gosh, that needs to be cleaned up. Oh, that needs to be tightened up. Oh, that needs to be welded. You know, and it starts going everywhere. It's very easy to get lost in that. And it's almost like you're focusing on the tree instead of looking through the forest, if that makes sense. So sometimes for me, I can get something by just buttoning up a couple of those things. And that's what I did with all of the tin work on the front here, the display cowls or the hoods. Dude, I jam up every time, whatever. You know, getting everything symmetrically dialed in, making sure any like imperfections are dealt with, making sure the trims, the edges are done, because a lot of that stuff was kind of roughed in, and it had like some finish work that wasn't dialed. Kind of on all the contact points and the seams. So that was just a step I needed to take, because I didn't want to start working on the interior portions of the car until like this middle portion was done. I believe last update we didn't have all the cutouts. I'm gonna get a step for you guys. So I think we had a lot of this roughed in. This, like I said, this middle panel, it's rigid. It's 90 thou 5052 aluminum. The fins here, or the gills, these are 5052 90 thou, and then a lot of the other stuff is 063, which is the 063 is our typical thickness for aluminum work. But just areas where you know there's going to be either people kneeling, elbowing, stepping, and you know, also like rock splash. Everything will come up and it'll boom, it'll hit, you know, and it's like you want something where it's not going to just ding and dent stuff. Like damage happens regardless, but trying to prevent some of that is key. Like this is all, you know, like it's solid to the point where it can take some stuff flying up and hitting and it won't be compromised right off the bat, and it's not going to look like it just got pelted. Design cues to look at with this stuff. The layout, we took a lot of time to even get the layout in here. I don't know if we mentioned before, we were supposed to, like, not supposed to, but we were originally going to have this portion, like if you kind of see where the intake manifold is in there, I don't know if you can, but there's like a coil pack relocator up here from Evan, and that's kind of your reference for the intake manifold. And then all of the blank here where there isn't any extraction openings, that's all your like your belt, your serpentine, and all your accessories. And we wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be like debris, because this will all be mesh. Like all this opening will have mesh on the back side, same as the openings on the side panels. But we wanted to make sure that wasn't directly going down into the belt system. With that, you know, we talked about having this be a split panel, and now it's kind of simplified where it's not two different panels. It's just 1, 2, 3, pop the sides off in the front, and then this whole thing comes out. And I think that's just more efficient, because then you can just get to every single thing in there. The design cues were really well thought out as far as like looking at the placement of these openings and kind of the profiles, and then transferring those into these. And obviously you can see they're progressive. This is a narrower opening, a middle-sized opening, and then a larger opening, and they all fall into cue with these. So it's all by design. And then obviously everything is kind of just letting itself off. Everything does get kind of some sharp tension into the cab and into the cabin space here. And we'll get into that, but I really wanted to get that overview here. If you want, I can pull the panels just for you to, I'll pull one side just to see where these lead off. All of this, like now, is trimmed. It's symmetrical for the most part. Obviously, like your layout here, I thought about that. Sometimes you can do layout like with, you'd call that a step roll, where I will prioritize the step roll over the component, meaning that like I'll just run this same design, like I'll crack a radius here, and then I'll transfer over and crack the same radius, and then I'll just get the hole going for whatever needs to be there after. But you know, it just pertains to every like particular project or every area on the car. And this is such a primary thing, it just made sense to have it kind of be dominant over the actual layout. People get a real boner for saying that looks like an alien head. I can understand that. My first skateboard was an Alien Workshop. 1990 something. Old guy. We're pretty dialed. This is how it's going to be. Obviously, there's no locations for like the hardware to hold the mesh in, and that's just going to be something. None of this stuff has holes drilled for the hardware holding the mesh. Once we get the mesh back, I think it's over at Cal West. We'll put all that in. Obviously, we'll show you guys the update on that. And I'll have it posted on my Instagram too. It's really good, and I don't know how many of you follow our Instagram, but if you want to see like what we're kind of getting after every week or every day, I keep things pretty current on there. And like, you know, I remember there were some questions about the Frontier and where that's at. And like, if you just kind of just tap into the Instagram platform too, you will be able to see what we're doing with all these vehicles that you wonder about. And you can also still ask, and we'll do the best to answer or supply you with more content regarding them. You know, this was just one of these things. I needed to get this identified and finalized, because it was like, just you look and there's loose ends. Like right now I look at stuff, I go, okay, that needs to be welded, but I just added that, and like all the Zeus buttons in here are not welded, and it really starts to build up and it becomes overwhelming. And so I think there's two ways to handle that. I think you just don't focus on it and you keep going, or you just, if you need some mental clarity on stuff and you're balls deep in a project, do something that makes you feel good, that makes you feel like you got something done that's one less thing or 10 less things off your list, and then get back to the big stuff. Like it's really about just how can you maintain focus and quality of life to get through the work. you know. So that's what I needed to do with some of this. I knew there was loose ends. I looked in here, I'm gonna pull this panel for you guys, but I needed to do that back panel. I needed to do the filler panels where there was like holes and openings from the inside of the cabin. Like there was just stuff that was undone that needed to be tightened up. And then we'll talk about some of the bigger stuff. So I'm gonna pull this panel right now. We'll talk about cutting these, but something I'm seeing right now. This had a nice tight notch in here, and you can see it's kind of like, if you wanted to, in theory, you want to be able to pull this panel by itself. You want to be able to pull that panel by itself. You don't want to have an overlap on the mains where you need to come in. If you came in to a pit hot and you needed, something needed to be checked in here, or this was barely hanging on, you need to get like, you want to be able to take each side off, and then you want to be able to take this middle front one off, and you want to be able to take the rear front off, especially this one, because this is your powertrain. That's kind of your vitals in there, and I'm just noticing like that's an issue where that peak, like it's a cool notch because it's like, but that on both sides, like I slipped out of this side because I don't have the other one on. So what we'll need to do is we'll have to revisit what we got going on there, and even like how I have it right now is almost looking like a solution. You know, that overhang, we might just want to get rid of it. Like if you look at that, maybe that's the cut to make. And we'll just think about something. This return, that's what you'd call like an edge that kind of flows off of another surface, is a return. And that is key and very crucial to what we want to add to that. That's next. Wanted to take this off. What I notice with panels is like you have this big pretty panel, right? I mean, that's undeniably a good shape. IMO. And then you go, huh, whoa. That's all the other work to get the kinks out of this thing. And it's like, it doesn't seem to end with aluminum kicking our ass. There's just so much, aluminum likes to move, and there's so much shrinking and stretching that goes on with these panels that a goal of mine, over, you know, the course of time is to be able to flip a panel over and have it look just as good on the back side as the front side. Because and it's the same, like some areas undeniably are gonna be bad, like behind a dash, welding, returns, trim, but like something like this where it's kind of universal, like you're taking it off like a hood almost. Like I wanna clean that up and have it pristine, but it's just sometimes you're cleaning your exterior so well and smoothing it, and you want the optimal result to be on the exterior, but I don't like to look and see like smoked out looking shit on the other sides. And so like I want to press myself to produce panels that look really good on the inside too. Even if it's, you know, you're welding a seam on the backside, like make the weld good. You know, like I want to put more care and pristine into the backside of panels too. Anyways. Looks kind of like some kind of a beetle shell or something, like off a bee or something, I don't know. This was something that needed to happen, right? So this is just well, you don't want to be buttoned in there, boy. That's your electronics in there. So we'll talk about, like we mentioned, the lower, like the Motec electronic console or display console or whatever you want to do there. But that needed some kind of a closeout because that's just raw dog electronics in there. You have quite a bit of flow coming through here. Like that's why there's a big valley under here. The whole point of the front being open is to funnel air through the middle. Take the holes in the middle, this top panel, are to extract air. You know, and it's the same thing, like you'll get better flow, and I'm terrible at explaining some of this, but if you want flow to happen, like you also need to have like exits for air to flow so it's not just getting caught, because at certain speeds you want there to be kind of a vacuum that's helping it. And you also want a relief, because if there's so much air getting packed in, if it doesn't have enough of a program to extract some of that air, it actually would be a wall at speed. You'd think, well, no, it'll go flow through, but if it's not enough flow going through and there's nowhere for it to go, it'll turn into turbulence where the air stops. So like that's why there's extraction as well. It's not just like a sealed tunnel going through here. But on that note, air from the front bumper opening comes through. It cools the power steering reservoir and the cooler. It cools the top portion where the lines go in for the pressure relief valve for the power steering. And then it goes right across the engine. A lot of the header work is on the sides here. There's big openings, you know, through all that stuff, and that'll all be mesh. But that's all positive airflow coming through, and it's pulling all the heat off this, and then it's extracting it. Not only is it doing that with the heat, but it's also letting air pass through the car. The whole point of like this exercise with the 6100 is to not deflect the air like going through it, because a lot of, like, if you think about these trucks, they're like bricks. They're just like this big wide rectangular thing just through the air, and that's why people put huge valences on the front, and they put like the kind of the guards, or you know, that like the arrow on the front A-arm portions, like where it's all just make the air go away and not get caught. But if you turn the table on that stuff, there's a way to make it cut the air and have it go through and slip it instead. And so part of this exercise is taking some of the airflow that you get naturally and using it to cool and using it to extract, and then also using it to let this car have stability and increase speed by letting air go through it, if that makes sense. You know, forgive me, but I'm trying here. And that's been our exercise. Obviously, like our deck height here, right? Like we've covered this in the other updates, but this is all by design. The cone of vision is completely dialed per Kevin, the driver. And he can see everything that any other person can see. Like there's a window you get with the height of these cowls that people sleep on, where they could actually increase that and increase all that. So this trap in here is less, and you have more of a slip where this air wants to slip through, right? So that, you know, you're closing out that portion, and that's the whole point of this. This middle portion we wanted to channel down some, because we do have one wind that we can get where whatever air is going through this middle can go directly through and into our cooling back there. The cooling we haven't got into yet, we don't have the coolers, but that's all by design. Back to this. This is just a simple cover. I can take it off. Now what this does is this obviously blocks all the electronics from the elements. It blocks the heat. If you wanted to put some kind of like heat shielding or deflection on this, you could too. But then all back there is where you'll be able to service all the electronics, the plugs. Essentially what you want is, you'd want like some like room with your wiring where you can take that console off from the interior portion, pull it, have it on your lap, work on it on your lap, sitting in one of the seats. And that's all something that can be done. But that's a very obvious panel that needed to happen. The other panels, let me just tag one in for safety here. The other panels are these side panels. Is it better to see that one or this one? No. That one? So there was kind of like a untapped void here. Untapped void. Where it was just sloppy. Like we couldn't figure out what was going on here, and I feel like everything coming through this area, it makes sense to deflect it away from the driver and shoot it down the middle. And so these are little just diffusers, right? They're just simple trim pieces. So we took everything that was going on here and just trimmed it and made it uniform per side. And then these are just simple deflectors that will funnel everything this way, and it's already capped here, and then just goes right through the middle. So it's not something where it's going to create turbulence, or, you know, if you're going through heavy dust, you got to think too, like if you ever watch like a wind tunnel video and they use, like they'll use indicator, I don't know if that's some kind of condensed air, right? They'll use that, and if you think about the dust and you're throwing, like you're going through huge dust, this stuff is gonna be right in your face if it's not extracted in a way that makes sense. That's why everything's at an angle, everything's cut. It's the same with this. Like you at least want to have the wind for whatever your view window is, you know? So these just make life easy. you know, and then it's also like that whole program is not locked in there. Like taking this whole unit off, these cowls come off, but that whole trim piece like makes things a lot easier to kind of move and navigate through like race car style, instead of like putting the puzzle pieces in and following each other. Like if I take that trim panel off, all that shit comes off way easier. You know, and same with this pod. Since this pod is kind of shaped where it expands out that way, it's not catching on things either. I've said it before with these are hex Zeus buttons. I like the hex because first off, like you know, a lot of times these things are loaded where you want to be able to kind of just push down and torque on the panels and then twist. And on top of that, instead of having like, you know, your classic like flathead quarter turn on here, the design aspect you get from this is they're uniform. So you never, like, you don't want to have it, well, you can have it how you want, but you know, if I had a tab that was on this portion here, I don't want to do this, but I will. You know, say the tab was here and then the spring plate was here, then this one might lock like that and this one might lock like that. And it can do that all through the board, and that creates a lot of like inconsistent symmetry where you could really get a simple win and everything be uniform. So these are extremely beneficial to me. I think that the simple quarter turns, the only benefit to a simple quarter turn is like desert enthusiast stuff. Hey man, we got to get a panel off, man. Anybody got like a dime? Can I get a dime? Or like you got a flat head because you don't have an Allen wrench, right? Besides that, I don't know if there's any other benefit. So let's talk about this stuff. So one of the ideas we had from the start working with Ben Walker was to run a channel through the middle of this like clip. This is a Mason body. It has like just maybe a 1-inch drop down through the middle, super close to the chassis tubes. And like that's what, when we planned on this thing, when we laid all this out, like we thought these were gonna be like really gnarly out into the front. And we built them exactly how we talked about, but just the body is even gnarlier. You don't realize how much mass like this thing takes up, especially from like your belt line or like your kind of your shoulder line of the chassis. I mean, you'd call it a belt line. And how much higher the actual body is. And when you put it all, like we were building just the pods and the aluminum on there, and I was like, man, it's gonna look crazy. It's gonna be like popped out through the front one piece, and oh my gosh, it's gonna be so gnarly. And then we're like, well, why do we even need this middle part? And we transitioned into like, wouldn't that be nice? A lot of the times on this stuff, like this clip, if this thing starts getting raggedy and ragdolled on one side, it essentially just turns into a big old floppy dick thing. And it's either coming up and it's blocking vision. It could decrease your efficiency with driving just by having that thing in the way or doing floppy dick. Or, you know, this whole thing wants to just blow off. And so what we wanted to try to do is, like we talked about this from the start, is just having fenders. Taking the one piece, because these are consumable items, meaning like, you know, per race, you'll probably go through at least front and rear body panels. You can probably save the cab if you're in a good spot, and then just replace your fronts and your rears. But, you know, being consumables, we didn't want to have to modify these like heavy. We just wanted to be able to like cut where we know we can follow like a body line on here, so we don't even have to take measurements or lay out, just kind of cut it. We know that fits on there, drill the holes wherever the body mounts or the pins are going to be, plop new ones on. So it's nice because literally if like this is damaged or something, you just pop this off. On top of that, service-wise, like if you need to check something, you can just pop into one side, no problem, and it's quick and easy. So this is your rough concept of what this looks like. Hood pin detail, probably gonna stray away from these and just go back to your typical auto fab, you know, male coming off the chassis, female body pin. See, I can do these things without making like a, you know, it doesn't always have to be that way. Anyways, gonna need to adjust these because right when I cut the relief in here and deleted the grill, like that's why this pipe stands here. You know, you can see it just it makes a sad face. So we'll pay respect to having this at least level or maybe even inboard, and make sure that it's happy where the body lines up with the mini fender. But what that looks like is like it definitely needs some kind of an outrigger out here, with, you know, at least 1 pin, 2 pin, and then a 3rd in here somewhere. On that note, right off the bat, you want to take that angle and you want to put like some tin work or some closeout here. I thought about doing tin work, but I think what's going to happen here is like this is going to chafe on here, and constantly, even if it's secured nice, it's still going to rub on here and just damage the panels if you're putting aluminum on aluminum. So I think what we'll do is we'll put like either a UHMW or even a soft durometer, like I don't know if like a poly sheet or something, neoprene, something softer. It really is just for air. It doesn't need protection. It just needs to channel, and it just needs to close out these edges. And then we just fasten that onto here with like hardware. And that's just something, you know, you just, the next panel, keeping that in mind always, the next panel, you cut here, you drill where you need to, and then you just take your old piece off, and then you just pilot right through where the old holes are, and you just put that back on. The other treatment that this will get, we'll talk about right now, but I need to get your camera up here. So something else to look at, like obviously the bodies fit as good as they fit. I mean, this is just how we got it right here. Nothing's changed. And that's kind of stuff you expect with, like, I guess, race fiberglass, off-road fiberglass in general. Far and few between on good fitment. It is what it is. I've seen it getting better and better, but like some products and some companies, it's still just crazy. The race stuff, not as much, but for pre-runner stuff, like if some guy has a nice ass truck that's a sealed cab pre-runner style truck, like you'd want glass that fits good, and I think it's something that everybody's working on, but it's still not there with a lot of companies or vehicles. This is our last like elephant in the room for the treatment on the front here. Obviously this is something really, the kind of valley there and the transition from the middle panels up to the top side panels, that's an easy kill. This is something where we want to, like, and I talked to Ben about this too. What we'll do is we're going to delete this, and then we're going to run just this is just going to be, call it a stapled on piece. So something where right here, we'll have just like a sheet metal piece that'll have louvers built back into it, you know, and I don't know if they'll go that way or if they'll be this way, and they'll be consistent with the gills there. And there might be more, I don't know. But we'll have this whole piece kind of built in. There goes $5 a tape, dude. So what that looks like, you're gonna work for me, boy. So if that's our shape here, we have these gills going across, there'd be like a return where all your hardware would go on this thing. And then these would be cut out. So they would be like laser cut shapes. Bear with me. They would be laser cut shapes, and I'll just do these two. And they'd be attached to the outside frame. And then what you do is you'd be able to take your hands, and if this is all flat, you could take these and you could bend them down. You could bend them down. So what that looks like from the side is you have a flat sheet, and then where these louvers are, you can literally just bend them by hand, you know? And that would be those guys. You press them all down. So this piece you could reuse, you can laser it. There's not a ton of labor in making it, and you literally just design that in SolidWorks where your louvers are, where you want the, you know, this is your outer perimeter. Literally you can just rivet this thing on. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of rivets, but if we were going for it, we could at least just 1024 stainless, like a button head. And we cut out, so that means we get rid of the louver that's here, get that win, because then we're not upsetting this profile anymore and we're able to match what we have going on. And then this is, you know, being a consumable item, we can just remove this piece, or if this whole thing goes by, see you, then we can just order more of these, or they're already stocked at Kevin's shop and he just puts a new one on each piece. And it's a very easy thing to just set on here, mark it, cut the insides, put it on, use the hole locations as a pilot, plop, 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 back on. And that cleans up all of this area. I think integrating some sort of a pin in that area, in this latch here, leaves us to not have to worry about any structure here. We just put the tin work on there, or this cover piece, and that's done. As far as the pins, this stuff, just like in saying when I was at Mason, I asked about those style pins, and these are, I think these are really good for pre-runners and things, but they're very hard because it's a small pin, and any kind of like upset with either the panel or say the structure gets damaged, locating a female hole on the chassis with this pin, it renders some problems. So that OG style, almost like an auto fab rubber grommet, just get it through the hole. That's what we'll do to simplify this whole program up here. And this will just be nice because, like I said, you'll pull 1, 2, 3. If we can get 3, awesome. And then obviously do the mini fender, and then this whole thing is gone. And it's just, it keeps things very simple. So I'm gonna pull these off, and then we'll dive into the bumper treatment and the lights and what we were kind of covered there. One of the things we wanted to figure out on the front was, like, obviously before Kevin got going as intensive as we are with this thing as far as the airflow and the aerodynamics on it, we had different layouts for lighting, and it was always a thing. Kevin has a large package of lights, and we've kind of been spitballing like what designs work, what makes sense, trying to keep our middle portion open as best we can. So like I think right now where we're at is we're gonna run a 40-inch bar, an Onyx bar, everything's Baugh Designs. And then we'll run like XL80s, 2 vertical hits here. And I think what we'll end up doing is maybe running these stacks. So 1, 2, 3, 4 per side. So there'd be 8 XL80s, 140, and then we're gonna have a bar up here with XL80s. I wanna say there'll be 10 up there, so on an actuator. So that's all stuff to look forward to. I just wanted to briefly cover that because next update, I think we'll have the bar in before we have the lower portion, but we want to do at least pre-run here. We're kind of like in this spot where we need to get as much of the electronic stuff done. I think I mentioned that last update, for James Lynn to come and start laying out the harness. So that's that. I wanted to get there before I remove this bar, and then we talk about our bumper additions. We shall talk about the bumper. I think the ums are weird, right? You should just deal with your silence for a minute. You don't have to fill space and time with a noise. Like why? Just, we're gonna talk about the bumper. Let's see, it doesn't have to be an It's a very bad habit. Doesn't mean that I don't do it, it's just a bad habit. Gonna talk about the bumper. So this thing, again, this is an Everson chassis. Andy built this. I couldn't figure out the process, and I didn't ask him. Kevin and I both didn't really like go through it. I think we just both wanted it changed, but there was a bolt-on portion here. So these things, this kind of a structure, like a bolt location where it's got a cup and then the hardware's in here, I'm gonna make an executive decision and I'm gonna change that to a spook hole instead of a Fifi cup, because all of us in here how I've been tired of saying Fifi Cup, and it's just been adopted from another shop, and I don't want to hear it anymore. So this thing came with 2 spook holes off the front bulkhead, and then what was going on is it had this small tube, so 1.5 inches on the bottom, went out to the end here, and then it had this guy, this kind of kicked thing, and then it had 1.75 inches up top. It ended right here, so about halfway where the lower one ended. And then it had this guy, this 1.75 inches, go up, and none of this structure was here. It just sleeved into the top, and it welded, like there was a tube, chassis tube coming out, and then it sleeved into it, and it was fully welded. So the upper portion of the bumper was a weld on, the lower portion was a bolt on. And even when you take damage, like if that thing bends in, you'd have to cut it right where the sleeve was, and the sleeve wasn't just a straight cut, it was kind of like a scalloped, like a notch, and then it was welded, you know, all through the notch. So we couldn't make the right logic with how that works. And also, like floating, you know, this 1.5 inch tube, it just turned into a major consumable. And I think no matter what, bumpers are definitely consumables, but to an extent, and you do want to be able to take some kind of impact. So we added to this, and then you got to think the next step here is this portion only sticks out of the grill, you know, a couple inches. And then, you know, the fender here, it dives back into the fender and disappears. And then this one is pretty much right at the face of the fender, or the grill opening. So it's not like there's a ton of protection. So what we'll want is we're gonna want to probably come off of here a couple inches and build like your typical style pusher, or your push bar. That might be something that's just hose clamped, or maybe it just has 2 pickup bolts, and that's it. And we'll, you know, that'll be like your general pusher that'll take most of your impacts. That can be the main consumable. Obviously, I'm well aware that these things take carnage all the time, and you rebuild the front bumper. There's not a lot of crazy work into this one. I mean, it's nice and it's tight, but it's not like a bunch of plate work. You know, like almost Vivian's front bumper edition was pretty crazy. But we just kept this very race car style, very simple, and then we added structure. So top tube pretty much went to here, and then it ended. There was nothing there. So what we did is I sleeved it, put like an 1.5 inch tube in here, beveled that, welded it, and blended it. So, you know, 360, you can't tell, but this whole portion is addition. And then, you know, I got this guy to follow, and if you kind of sight this, you know, that bend here, it kind of hits on the same planes. I don't know if you guys can track that or not. But everything is like congruent with what was already there. So it adds a nice design feature instead of just going straight down or something. And then obviously tied support back in, still landed right close to the structure here. So that's all sharing the same load path. And then on that bottom one, this bottom tube was still kind of floating. So tied this tube right on tangent with what we got here, and that tube goes right into the same spook hole cup here. So it's still, you know, it looks like it was built like that. Design wise, I think it still works when you don't have the body on. Still has a pretty good presence. And then if you really picture the lights, right, the lower bar, the 2 XLs or the XL80s, and then, you know, another 2 going across, it's gonna have a really good kind of menacing approach here, with or without the body on. Something to note, I'm sure you guys have asked before, is the tacks and the spacing and consistency there. If you go in and you watch the welding instruction on our double pass welding, and I think part 1 is going to cover the tacks, there's a really good explanation on why we use this process. So plenty of information to go tune in on another episode with to figure that stuff out. like I mentioned before, with all of the center console, I guess you could call it the center console, the dash pods, like anything interior wise is a matter, especially on a race car. Excuse me. It is always a get in and out through the window. If there's not a lot of structure on the sides, you can sometimes slip through, or you can just bend through some of the triangles or the openings. But like for this center thing, it is one of these over and over. And then I got this little guy for my butt, because if I'm spending a lot of time in here, I kind of got to be crouched, or I got to find somewhere I can sit. And then we'll sit here and get all these shapes right. So it's like, it makes you practice efficiency on like, okay, I'm going in, because you want to cut down the time that you go into these things. I'm going in here to work on this. What am I going to need? Okay. And then I'm like, if I'm taking templates, how much other stuff can I do? And you want to try to like dial in as many processes as you can do per time coming into the car, just to alleviate that. And it still ends up being a ton of time, or a ton of repetitive in and out, ingress, egress stuff. So I want to show you guys this thing. And more often than not, I'm like squatted on stuff instead of sitting. So your feet are the ones that get you. And then you don't want to be in the same place too long, because your legs or your butt or your foot will go to sleep. And this is the thing that we've been working on. So it's like there's two items here. There's this thing above me, that's the upper control console, that's just roughed in. And then there's this middle portion, which is our console for Motec displays and Motec touchpads. So all these guys these are 3D printed from James Lynn Motorsports. And they're very helpful because they're exact mock-up. You're not harming the electronics. You're not worrying about arc with the welding process and melting these things, period. So I've actually like tacked pretty close to those, and they get a little shiny, but they don't melt. This is like, what I was getting at is, these two items are probably the most labor-intensive items on the whole car. And labor-intensive, not necessarily by like the time, because the floors took, like the aero that we have in the floors was a big chunk of time. And I think that it needed to happen to build the rest of the car, but man, like those took a lot of time. Everything's taken some time, but this, what I mean by labor intensive, is like crawling in and out of a car. And especially a race car that doesn't have doors and does not have any formidable passageway besides just crawling in through the windows. So getting this stuff done, like it's one of those things you just don't think about it, and you just do it till it's done, you know? And you just pull them out square, they really come out nice. This is our piece, all right? So pretty elaborate back here. Everything has like returns, and everything has kind of an interior shelf. And again, like I talked about, like making this stuff pretty. I mean, this is pretty well composed. You do see some like backside welds, which just look like seagull shit. But this program, like this renders, all of these returns on here renders a really smooth outcome. And I'm not welding all the seams. Like a big question a lot of people have is like, how do you finish the seams? All on like interior joints. Or interior like fit up, and really I'll weld from the backside and it's sealed enough. Like if this gets a powder coat, the seams just go away and they're completely sealed. Obviously if there's some seams like this portion here, that's enough where I can usually chip away at that with like a flap disc, or not a flap disc, just a disc, like a 3-inch roll-lock disc. Same with this stuff, maybe a maroon surface conditioning pad. So this guy's dialed. This houses all of our electronics for the engine management and for most of the car, all the Motec stuff. There is a main kill switch here. That's your typical like cool guy, fighter pilot, ejecto seat looking thing, or you know, missile lock, where it's got a red flip up that you know has the switch inside. That switch is to kill all of the Motec electronics. Like it's a master kill. and that thing will ride in the position of just off. And what I mean by off is when the red catch will be down, and then when you want to kill it, you need to flip it up and hit the switch the other way. So this is nice because it houses everything we need right in it. So if there's like a little bit of a service loop in the harness, someone can sit in here and they can either take the stuff off or work on it, or of course there'll be another plug too. So it's nice to have it all in one concentrated thing. I'm gonna put this on and then I'm gonna talk about this guy up here. Another detail to note on this stuff is, instead of just like, these are Frenched in, right? So we didn't use a bezel like that would come. You can also like do the easy way, and you can get a bezel that just holds these, and they have like a shelf return where you just go plop, cut the hole, plop, and then drill it and mount it. But obviously, like for design reasons and just for obvious reasons, we're not doing that. So these are Frenched in, but they're also Frenched in where they're at an angle. So they're not just flat, but they also are at a more of a kicked angle, and that's for ergonomics, for touching these things and kind of seeing them to your cone of vision, right? So it's not just something that's vertical, it's got that kick. And then also on the screens are not only kicked at that angle, vertical angle, but they're also kicked in a way where they're more angled towards the driver and the passenger. So they're not on this plane of the entire structure, but then they're sunk deeper. So there's actually an X and a Y kick in these things. And that added detail, and same with this shelf that would be like vertical usually. This is all beveled and kind of pulled out. So everything is tailored to displaying right to the primary person seeing it. And that's the same way for both sides. Obviously there's less buttons here for your driver, and then your co-dog gets double that on this side. There'll be another 8-button keypad that'll be somewhere on the driver's side, like driver side. So this guy's done. See, I'm already in that point where I got to readjust my feet. Okay. All right. Design cues through this thing. It's really important for myself, at least with design, like the middle of the car, of any body or structure or chassis, the middle is always a point to refine and tell the story of the middle, and it being a center point. Like a lot of cars will have a very subtle detail line that splits out both sides, and it kind of tells that story of it being the complete center line through the car. And there's always little details, and you can look at it on production cars. Sometimes it's just a very simple crease in the sheet metal, and then something more extreme like this, or even carbon layup. If you look at carbon layup, a lot of supercars will have the seam right down the middle, and I think that just shows care, and it shows symmetry, and it shows good design. So with this, like, this is kind of, people go, oh, there's a sharp surface in here, oh my god, like what kind of sharp are we talking about, dude? Like, I don't know, man. So this gives this pull, like, just with all the design, I think it's like obvious why that shape would be like that. And it's also like, it's the split, there's no need for this to have a dash all the way across. There's an immense amount of structure already going through here, and really, like, we're tailoring this to be a cockpit. It's exactly what it is. There's a driver over there, and he has a small GPS. He has minimal stuff that he needs to adjust. He has a brake bias on his left-hand side. He will have, a handbrake that'll be coming up through here, and then he has a screen. He has this redundant screen, and he can put what he wants to see on that display. And then the co-driver will have his duties when, a lot of this, the co-driving in an off-road vehicle, and I think it's very similar to a rally car, and it's definitely gotten more involved over the years with co-driving and just competition and having the ability to have navigation, where the time I've spent doing this, I don't really look up at the course as much as I'm on telemetry, scanning gauges, and calling out notes on the course. It's a thing. So that's why this GPS that folds up through here, this is the primary hit, and then he has his display here. They'll obviously be dummy flashing, like indicators, if something is out of the realm of comfort with any, like, of the systems. And then there's obviously his just like his keypads here too, which will have a lot more options on this side than this side, because the real focus is driver needs to drive. Eyes on the prize, minimal, it has a GPS just for some secondary reference, and then it's all in your ears. Whatever your co-dog is telling you, that's it. Go, 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 go. And this is all based on information. This guy is just an information source. This dude needs to be calling out everything, and he needs to be watching everything. So the only focus he has is just to go fucking, and that's it. So like, that's why it's very Cockpit. It can be individualized. There's no need to share. It's not like, hey man, your oil pressure's looking low over there. No, it's not a pre-runner like that. You don't need to do that. This guy needs to drive. So that's why it's like that. And then same thing up here, like, the design, it's just a great option, because then it's like we get to streamline this thing right through the middle, pull this, and then once this is like, this adds that symmetry. If you kind of look up, like even the jack mounts, they tie in and they kind of have these points. If you kind of think about design, if you look at this point, everything in the middle of the car is telling that centerline story. So once we start, like we have our electronics down here, and then we have all of our secondary accessories, right? So we have the AC blowers for the helmets. Each side has their own AC blower control. We have the intercom to adjust for communications. And then we have the radio faceplate, like the race radio faceplate. And like, I think fire poles we'll put up there, and dome or map lights. And so this whole structure that we've started up here obviously carries design from the bottom portion and carries it up. It needed to be wider than it did longer. Now in James's Frontier, this thing is more of a streamline, like teardrop. It's very narrow. It just has a Switch Pro in there, and that's all it needs. But for what we have up here, we have multiple accessories that need to be mounted. And on top of that, you're in a full containment seat, right? So full containment means you got head slappers on each side, and those things go out big. So like whatever, this is as much as you're gonna get, you know, and I'm not even sitting as high as you would. And that's the thing, like, so if you're reaching on shit back here, you can't even get to that because you're shoulder bolstering. Like once this seat's in here, it's gnarly. And it's like, you're really in a cockpit. And so with that, like if you need to reach something back here, you can't see it that much, right? Your cone of vision again. And then your reach, you're definitely not getting your left arm if you're the co-dog, so you have to be reaching over to get something. And if it's back here, it's just functionally, this design and the shapes up here, I don't want to like crunch the light. The shapes up here are strictly based on functionality and cone of vision. Where can you reach and where can you see? And that's what this is. And so this kind of ties off, and this just drags right up to here, you know, and this same point, this is inverted. And now you go, oh, well, did you need to do that? Not necessarily, but adjusting controls. If you've ever ridden in something like this, like same with the GPS, you want to be able to hold on to something, because no matter how smooth it is, your hands still are like, if you're trying to touch it, you need somewhere to brace. You need a secondary grip, something where you can isolate your hand, and then you can use the controls with your thumb or your fingers or whatever, a knob. Same with the GPS. That's why the GPS has a really robust like side grab on it, because the buttons are on the sides. And that's the same with this. This is a hand rest, and I can do it on this side, but this is a hand rest. Whatever you need to do, you're good. You can just lock in, and then all of our controls are going to be Frenched in here, just like these are Frenched. These controls will be Frenched, and you have a solid, stout plant where when you're able to just grab something in that motion under stress and be planted and isolated. And so that's what this doubles has. It's not only a design feature, but it's a functional design feature where it literally lets you plant your hand and make adjustments all throughout this. So if you need to slide over here, you can, you know, and you're always gripping, so you're not just floating. Oh shit, I'm trying to grab this, you know, and you have no edge to grab. Hope that makes sense. Part of this too, you know, this is a large, robust console. It goes up, it looks gapped right now, but up here, once the tin work, like there's an 1/8 inch piece of aluminum that goes on here that's all rolled, and you can see the tab. it goes, and there's an 1/8 inch gap everywhere. So it's very clean to the sheet that goes on here. We just have this roof floating right now, so it's not really going to give you the same impression of what the realistic gap is there. This whole thing is a large shape, and I just seeing it the easy way to do this is you go, yeah man, just all the way across here, and then you've literally just compromised so much space for what? And I just think that like you can get a win like right off the bat. These tabs, there's tabs for the roof panel in here, so you don't have to drop this to take the roof panels off. This whole thing comes off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it comes off, boom, and you'll be able to service every single thing in here, and it just breaks up the shape, right? So, you know, that's the whole thing is like, I like when you can do sheet metal where it like encapsulates part of the tube work, like this kind of wraps around the tube work, and same with this stuff. This is like all open space, you know, it doesn't, and it's just got a very nice leading edge. It's not sharp, so it just kind of can take stuff and lead off, right? And we'll finish all this. It'll all be finished in the same way. So I'm really pleased with this. It took a lot more time to figure out the layout and how this needs to go versus building it. And that's always the case with some of this stuff. It's like once you start getting the traction of what it needs to look like and chunking it out, then you can really start going quick. Like, and I have this to almost to a point here. I need to like clean some of the nasty shit up here on the faces. And then once I have enough welding done on it in the car, I can take this whole thing out. I can detail it all out on the table. I just kind of got to figure out my packaging here and make sure it looks right. And then, you know, I'll start. It's almost like a sculpture. I'll take this rough sculpture and then I'll start to just, you know, shave away and sculpt into this thing and chunk things in. And that's the same thing we did with this. Is I got all the faces done and then I made templates like of what footprint the display is going to have, what footprint will the touchpad have per side, lay them out in there, and then, you know, figure out if I sink this in this much at this point, since it's a triangle and I sink one side in, where is it going to contact the other side? And that kind of all dictates the design, you know. And we'll do that same thing up here. I think in this area, like obviously you would have an intercom, so priority for Kevin is he's going to want to have AC blower, and then he's going to want to have an intercom. That's it. With the fire poles, I don't know like the cable orientation, and if we have them, like if they're going this way, the fire pole might be something that's chunked into this, or if you can't see that, it'll be chunked into here, you know. And then I don't know where we want map lights. I don't know if that's something like this, but it's just all, that's my next phase here, is figuring that out. Again, labor intensive. This will drain your energy a lot more than other stuff, and it's a challenge because you want to keep the quality of work at the same level. I talked about that recently, and it's like I can't skimp just because this sucks to get to, or I'm having to work like most of the time I'm upside down, so I'm crunched in here and then I'm doing this the whole time. All right, fitting it, and then I'm sitting there and I got to figure out, okay, how am I going to use the pedal? I got to use the pedal, get this going, you know, check it. And so the whole time, you only get so much time working upside down. It's like a mechanic working under a car where your arms start to go and then you got to chill for a second, and it's that same process here. But I don't want to skimp on the quality or the design just because it sucks to work on. So it's just one of those things you push through and you feel good about it in the end because you know you didn't cut it. And so once we get to the point where these two, like this is pretty much finalized, but once this is done, I think we're in a really good spot with the middle of the truck where we don't have to crawl in and out in the middle. And so that is my motivation with this thing, is just like finish the shit that sucks right now. And none of it sucks, but you get what I'm saying. Like just climbing in and out of this thing, it's you know, it's a chore. So detail that thing out. That's going to finish out our electronics. There's a couple ports, like plug-in ports, that we'll put into here, but they don't need to be Frenched in. They'll just be simple kind of face plates, or they'll back up to the back side of this stuff. That's kind of going to close out our interior portions. So part of a lot of the builds too is if it's possible, I would always try to do the most difficult things first, whatever that means for difficulty for you. But just it makes things a lot more of a downhill if you can just get the hard stuff over with. And you know, that's why, like, this is just you know, a lot of work in here, a lot of stuff to do, and it's made my life a little easier because at least I can shed all the skins. So I'm gonna go ahead, I wanna cover a couple more things, but I'm gonna at least take the skins off for you and you can kind of see this from a different perspective. Now it's kind of a different vibe. See, I like the truggy vibe a lot more, or the bodyless truck, if you will. Saberlight, don't forget. If you guys know ways to get just the Saberlight cord and not the actual light, please contact us, because what's been happening is the power cord source is failing before the lights fail, and so we have like 4 of these lights and we have 1 good power cord, and it's like I have to buy another light just to figure out the power cord situation, and I haven't been able. It's a weird plug. From perspective, pretty good symmetry, and that's your tray. So all of this area will be your interior accessory tray. You can see it's pretty wide open. Like, if you imagine just this thing closed off on the top, there's a lot of real estate in there for electronics. Everything will work out, and then obviously we just have that breakup. But again, you know, let me get through here. Kind of see like the style and the design language is working pretty well through here. It looks like this looks a little tall and weird when it doesn't have the roof panels on. But when it does, it comes together pretty well, and you can see kind of how aggressive that cut is and how that can be a hand rest. You know, anything you need to do, you're set here for that. And again, remember, this will all be Frenched in, so a lot of this break that's here and this direction change here, it'll be like face plates sunk into this, very similar to how we have this stuff. And then this is just kind of another rundown just because I'm in here closer with the camera. But you can see like the angle that this is kicked in, so this isn't just flat here, sunk in. And then you can see the side angles here too, right? Same with the displays. So there's a lot of little detail in there, and same with that bezel, right? That bezel kind of comes out. And those details, I think those make a world of difference with design and functionality. You know, like just if you're sitting here, you know, being able to see what you need to see easier, like just kicking that thing over just enough to make a difference. Removing the edge here so the display is never compromised visually. And same with the keypads, you know, having some kind of angle in there. It's also a lot more supportive to be able to touch these things, having some kind of a lip and not having them vertical, so you can kind of lean in because your arm is already coming from an angle. So I think all those little details and the consideration there will make for a better in functionality with the product. You can kind of see how nasty this thing is. This thing doesn't really have a sharp edge. It looks very pointy, but there's nothing like, I think you could maybe center punch that with your head really hard and it would leave a mark or maybe hurt. But I don't know at what point you're gonna get past a full containment seat with a 5-point harness. If you hit it with your hand, like that's never a thing, right? Like, you'd have to not be buckled in your car, and you're gonna learn today if you're not buckled in your car, period. So that's where we're at with this stuff. You can kind of see the nice gentle radius in here too. I really like how this thing comes together. Let me see if I can get you. There we go. So this thing should pan out really nice. I mean, I think for a detail piece, you know, like you can see your peak through here. And that thing hits pretty good. So I think that's just a really nice trim finish piece for the top, and it kind of seals the deal as far as the design stuff goes through here. You know, it's a really nice centerpiece. And you can see it directs everything. The jacks back here, which kind of have that same centered tension. Obviously you need final welding on these guys, so don't trip too hard, okay? Blame Colin. All right, we pretty much got through the list. Something we want to look at, I know you guys have asked about it, is the slapper arm. So I know the engineering and like the pioneering of this whole setup is from the 90s. And then it's kind of made a comeback back around. I know Nick Eisenhower has an Everson truck, it's got the same thing. I've seen it both ways. The thing I really like too is that it doesn't have a bunch of structure. So you don't have a big old meaty chingus hanging off this thing. And it's not like, the whole point of this is to have clean travel and not have scrub. Because if you think about when this, like if there's a bump stop hanging up, when this arm comes up, you essentially want your bump stop to be 90 or perpendicular to wherever the face of your contact point is for the upper arm, right? If you're just mounting a bump stop to the chassis. So that's why you'd see like on the Exotic or something, they're kind of like, they have this and they have a gnarly structure coming out, and you have, instead of a rod end on the bottom here, you have like a nylon pad. The nylon pad it does have scrub because you think this is fixed and this is moving. So that rod has to like scrub on its contact area. And essentially it's not clean travel, it's scrubbing and it's causing friction through the suspension travel. This setup with this rod end on the bottom, like a shock would have, this allows it pivots here, but also like this, it's always has a clean contact point and it's consistent. There is no scrubbing. So everything, it's just another suspension system, if you will, sitting atop here that's always making perfect contact. Everything's harmonious and it's working as one, right? And that's the whole benefit to like a slapper arm. So I hope that helps you guys. Like if you take this bolt out, you can see the bump stop's freestanding. And so that's why it pivots on this, right? Going through the travel. And then this thing pivots on the top plane of the A-arm here, which is almost direct and center line, but you know, you'd have to kind of either do this on the computer or you'd have to cycle it to get it exactly where you want it. And then obviously when this thing goes down, it's perfectly square contact. So the other benefit too is you're not thumb punching this thing with like, you don't have like a pad on top of your bolt. You don't have to have any kind of weird appendages on the top contact point for like a fixed bump. And also you're not hitting on your arm. Like some people have their bump stops hit on their arm. And if you think about it, this like main bolt is your contact point, your closest contact point. So if you're out here, you're actually stressing the arm and the load path of the bearing in here. So I hope that kind of clears the air, gives you guys a little more insight into what you would call a slapper arm. Or you know, I don't know, that's the only term I know. Make up whatever you want, but secondary upper A-arm, bump stop A-arm, those all sound fun. As far as where we're going with this thing, I ummed it again, dude. As far as where we're going with this thing, upper control console or accessory console dialed. Exhaust finished, just run it, you know, and figure out the exit. Have all of the A-pillar, B-pillar, tin work dialed. This kind of has to get formed and get some good shape into it. And kind of have this thing polished from B-pillar forward. No lights, not yet. And then our light rack on the top. So that's all pretty involved stuff. I think that's a really proper spot to get our next update in. I hope you guys are enjoying this thing. It is one of those things that's kind of on the chopping block of needing to get it done. So there should be some pretty consistent updates on this. I know sometimes it seems like we showcase a car and then what happened? How come, where is it? This and that. And you know, this is one of those ones where it's gonna get finished and we're gonna get the win with it right now, and that's that. So hope you have a good Monday. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys for the support.